Chris, is Dudley's criticism of Paul George in bounds or out of bounds here?
I think it was in bounds because he kept it in bounds. He kept it on the court. If he had talked about his family or his lifestyle or something like that, that would have been out of bounds. So I was fine with that. Other people might say, well, who is Jared Dudley? A career role-playing journeyman to be critical of a perennial all-star like Paul George. Here's the thing. Remember, Jared said we, the Lakers, thought it was disrespectful. So LeBron, AD, maybe Rajon Rondo and the rest of the team, they felt that way. If Dudley had said it himself, oh, I thought it was disrespectful, then I think it would have been fair to criticize him because obviously Paul George is light years ahead of Jared Dudley. So I think it was in bounds. But here is the crux of the matter. To me, what this ultimately says is that the Lakers have a serious lack of respect for Paul George. Because they talked about billboards they saw in L.A., and we saw the commercials and about the Clippers being the kings of L.A., and it's their town. That was Kawhi. That was more Kawhi than anybody. Then they gave Patrick Beverley a pass. But Beverley was the one that told Steph Curry the next 5 years belong to us, and everybody, including the Lakers, heard that. Beverley was the one that after he blocked LeBron's shot in a game at the end of the regular season or in the regular season that pumped his fist and had all the histrionics. You can't say just because that's who he is, you let it go. There was no reason to single out Paul George as the one. Because here's the thing. Before last year's finals before it ended, Paul George was on Anthony Davis's level. He wasn't on LeBron's, but he was on AD's. Now, we can say AD is a better player than Paul George, but Paul George is a perennial all-star. He actually had more playoff success by far than AD. He led a team to the Eastern Conference Finals twice. He challenged the Big Three in Miami, took them to 7 games when his next best player was like Roy Hibbert. So he had done way more than AD in the playoffs up until the end of the finals. So the only reason to single out Paul George is that you went after the guy you don't respect. You went after the easy mark. And the only way that Paul George is going to shake that reputation is not by having a great regular season, which he's having. It is by having a great run in the playoffs en route to winning a championship.
But Jared Dudley voiced that, and he said that. But there's a lot of players around the league. You see how they coming at Paul George because Paul George views himself as a Tier 1 player. And I look at Tier 1 players. You've won a championship. You won a regular season MVP. You won a finals season or a finals MVP, or you're a player of the year, one of those awards. So you look at Kawhi, you look at Steph, KD, LeBron, and Giannis. That's it. Paul George carries himself. You heard what Devin Booker say, man, sit your soft you-know-what down. Seth Curry went at him in the bubble. Now, that was maybe for a lot of different reasons. But Jared Dudley is not the only one that sees Paul George, sees himself as a Tier 1 player. And he's like, hold on, bro, wait a minute. All I know is that, yes, but he had only won one playoff series since 2014. And that was last year when they beat the Dallas Mavericks. Everybody saw you finished third in the MVP voting. Russ asked what you had in Utah. He's like, I got a strong spade hand. I got 5 on it, and gave him 5 points. Russ dropped 45. So we've seen him come up small in the playoffs. He gave himself the name Playoff P. So I don't care if he averages 40 in the regular season. He better average 42 come playoff time, because that's the only way this is going to go away. I get it. You write a book, Skip. You wrote the book up a year ago. It comes out, and now you bringing up old stuff that you said last year, and it seems like you just said it yesterday. I get it. We're going to leave. Hey, I like Paul. I love PG's game. Smooth, can shoot the three, take you out the bounce, get to the mid-range, can finish at the rim, shoot good free throws. But, bruh, you brought this on yourself. You got up there at your introductory press conference and say, playoff P here now, bro. Ain't no more of that stuff. Okay, make it all go away.
Okay, my turn. I know Jared Dudley pretty well. I like the heck out of Jared Dudley. He's really a good man with a big heart. But in the end, you have to sit back and say, who the heck is Jared Dudley to be writing a book and taking on Paul George? As many failures as Paul George has suffered through playoff games, and I've called him George Paul a lot of times on this show because he's not an alpha, he's not a takeover guy, he is a complimentary star. But he is a star, and as Chris points out, 6-time All-Star, 4 times All-Defense. He's got big game. He's got top 10 in this league talent. I don't know if he always lives up to it, but he's got top 10 talent. So here's Jared Dudley writing a 42-page book after he played a grand total of 31 minutes in...
You keep calling it a book, though, Skip. It's more like Cliff Notes.
I don't know what it is, but whatever. I'll give it to him. It's a quote-unquote book. It is like Cliff Notes, but he played 31 minutes in the whole playoff run last year in the bubble, and it was all in mop-up of the mop-up duty. He comes after the janitor.
You look at that Skip beating the man up. You talking about Jared Dudley. Now you talking about...
Okay, but my favorite line was from Ty Lue before the game last night, and he said, a book? Jared Dudley? Well, that was my reaction. A book from Jared Dudley? Yeah. I get it. Chris says he's speaking for the team. I don't know if the team will love him speaking for it, but I'm sure that was the prevailing sentiment.
LeBron, AD.
Don't include me in this.
We ain't say that like that. We got the utmost respect for PG.
They will not, they won't say it.
Okay, I got it. But I do love that he wrote this, and it was, I think, in diary form, so it's like he's writing it on the fly, and then they're going to pull it together
every day,
and publish it. Mm-hmm. But listen, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, if you haven't noticed, they're on a new mission this year. And Paul announced his re-arrival in game number 1 against the Lakers because he took it over in the second half, scored 26 just in the second half alone, and made 4 or 5 threes. I believe that he got his button pushed before the game last night, and I know it was just Cleveland, but it was back-to-back after what I thought was a finals preview game, a big, tough struggle of a game for the Clippers on the road at Brooklyn, and then they had to go to Cleveland against a very tough-minded young Cleveland team that will not quit, and they all played. Kawhi played. Paul George played, and Paul George hit 8 out of 9 threes. That was extraordinary, and I think it was in retaliation and reaction to what Jared Dudley had said about him.
Hey, Chris, if you don't mind me asking, so what am I supposed to do about playoff P? Last year in Game 7, after they being up 3-1, he went 4-16 on the Game 7 against the Nuggets last year. Okay, in the elimination game, Game 6 against Utah in 2018, he was 2-16. That's when he put that strong spade hand on that 5 points on it. In the elimination game, Game 4, they were swept against Cleveland. He went 5-21. So what am I supposed to do about that, Skip?
All right.
That's playoff P.
What am I supposed to do about the fact that Paul George said in the bubble, it got to me, I needed counseling. Okay. I was depressed. Okay. I went into my shell, okay? I give him that because I think a lot of guys were going into their shell in the bubble, right?
Not my guy.
Okay, well, not your guy. And I give him that. He was the one guy that rose above the bubble and said, I got to keep my team together. What was another Jared Dudley quote on a podcast? I think it was on maybe Danny Green's podcast 3 weeks ago. He said, those boys did not want to be in that bubble talking about the Clippers. Well, they didn't. Yeah. Half the Clippers were coming and going and in quarantine. It was terrible. They didn't want to be there, and they were looking forward to playing the Lakers, and they overlooked the Nuggets to their detriment.
Skip, I'd like to add this to it, and you brought this up, Skip, in the bubble or, during the bubble, after Paul George made those comments about being depressed and struggling mentally. And look, I think all of the players, the Lakers, the players throughout the league, I think they respect guys stepping up and talking about mental health. And, we've seen players now be more open about it. I think they all applaud that. However, you brought this up, Skip, and I think you were right. On the court, if they sense that is a weakness in you, they're going to go with that. And I think that's a part of this. Okay. It is do or die. It is dog eat dog.
I got it.
When we're going for a championship. Right. And if they think that Paul George is mentally weak or something like that, they're going to go at him. I've talked to executives around the league who've, again, while you applaud the players speaking about mental health, who've pointed out, well, can you count on this guy? Can you, he remember it as a sign of mental weakness because we all know how tough it is, how you have to be as mentally tough as you are physically tough to really win at the highest level. And I think that's a part of this, too.
That's why Kawhi playing back-to-back. He knows what's at
He
stake.
does.
Kawhi playing back-to-back. Ain't played back-to-back since 2015.
Okay. Chris, we appreciate you joining us. Thank you for watching. You can subscribe here to get the latest from the show, and be sure to check out more of the best clips from Undisputed, or go watch a few other segments from our other shows on FS1.